Welcome to our program, Coach-to-Coach. Today's guest is Lynne Brannigan. Lynne is a coach, and for more than 20 years, Lynne has been working with professional women and entrepreneurs to help them move their businesses forward and to make changes in their lives to prioritize what's important to them. I've been working closely with Lynne for the past 2 years on programs like Coaches Exploring Clarity, and currently we're working on Coaches Exploring the Untethered Soul, which we're having a blast with. Thanks for joining us today, Lynne. It's so nice to see you.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me. Nice to see
My
you too.
pleasure. So the way I love starting these off is by asking the question, what first sparked your interest in coaching?
Oh. That's a long ago memory, so I was thinking about that. What first sparked my interest in coaching was working for someone who, unbeknownst to me, as a side gig, was a coach, and I recognized in her a different way of working and interacting with people, communicating. Found it kind of interesting, and that's when I first learned about coaching. And then shortly after that, that was on secondment in the US. I came back to the UK and found myself a bit of a what now moment, and hired my own coach. If I hadn't met her, I wouldn't have known I could do that. So that was interesting. And from there, when I understood what coaching was, it seemed to make sense that that was a good road to go down. So yeah, a person sparked my interest in coaching.
Nice. I love it. I love how just seemingly random encounters with people can send us off in a whole new direction in our lives, and we don't even know it. And speaking to you as a coach myself, I love that about being a coach too, is that each interaction we have with somebody can potentially send them in a whole new direction too.
Absolutely.
So tell us about your practice, how you're working, who you're helping. Just give us a sense of what you've got going on these days.
Yeah, I guess like you said in the intro, and you know me by now, so you know that I have a little trickiness around that, putting people into a box and saying they're this thing or that thing, but they do have things in common. And what they have in common is they've reached a point where they want to change or create something, or maybe achieve something that looked a bit ahead of them, and they realize they're not getting there by themselves. So that seems to be the common thread, that there's a recognition that, okay, I want to do something and I could use some help with it. It has developed into working almost exclusively with women. I didn't start out that way, but that's kind of where it is today. That's on a one-to-one. On a group level, I do some group work locally, and about my online groups, that's been kind of evolving over the past few months. So yeah, it's that notion of helping people. I guess what they really want is the ability to sit with someone, to see things differently, to see fresh things, something new, a different way of doing things, approaching it, get over some of their own stuff, and we all know about that. So talking to Michael Singer. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned your group work. I know you do the Thank God It's Monday, Monday morning calls. I know for most people listening to this, I can't imagine most of them ever have that thought cross their mind. Thank God it's Monday. So I'd love maybe you can tell us what sparked that idea for you, and just give us a bit of a flavor of what goes on in those calls on Monday mornings, and what the feelings like when you come off those calls.
Yeah. Yeah, this morning I was having a conversation with someone else earlier, and we were talking about nudges, and that call came from a nudge. We always hear, thank God it's Friday. Oh yeah, it's the end of the week, thank God I can relax, whatever. And I've had so many conversations with people around this whole Monday morning thing, and looking to the week ahead and not really looking forward to it. Some people telling me how it was ruining their Sunday or their whole weekend, thinking about the week ahead. And that, thank God it's Monday thing just popped into my mind. And the idea was that, I create a space for people to turn up and connect and start the week motivated and looking forward as opposed to dreading it. And it's been amazing. I was also talking this morning about holding things lightly, and to begin with, I held it very lightly as opposed to, right, I have to design something, and I need to know what's going to happen, because I didn't. I didn't know what was going to happen. So the only thing that's constant is starting the call by asking, what are we grateful for this Monday? And that always takes us down a path and leads to whatever the next obvious thing is. This morning, we went from looking at purpose to life being a series of moments, and kind of dancing with the moment. How hard we are on ourselves, how we can get down we have kind of rules and stipulations, and that's how I do things. And then when we see that that's all made up to, how we can get out of that and how lovely things can be. And actually where we ended up this morning, and it's really funny because person I was with earlier, Dave, who, I wrote the last comment I wrote on this morning's call, because someone had said it was, if only everyone knew you are enough. And I turned up to the call with Dave, and he had a sweatshirt on with lots of writing in the back. And on the front, it said, "You are enough." And I'm like, oh, that's very cool. So that's kind of, the calls are, they're just about life and how we see things and how we trip ourselves up and then see through that if we can. So it just sort of meanders.
I'm curious for you, how have your Mondays changed since you started those calls versus what they were like before?
Yeah, well, I look forward to them on a Sunday for sure. I know that I never know. I don't know always who's going to turn up, but I know that there's going to be a rich conversation, and and just the explanation of it, the fact that I don't know what the conversation is going to be. So, every week we dive into the unknown, which is really nice. I just look forward to it immensely, and I feel deeply grateful that people turn up. I didn't know I can't remember how long we've been going now, maybe since June. So of course I didn't even know when I had the idea if anybody would turn up or that they would still be turning up months later. So I'm deeply grateful.
That's a good sign that people are getting something out of it. So that's great.
Yeah, it's a good sign.
Our mutual friend Hakan had shared a saying with me that he got from somebody else. I forget the person's name, about QTR, quality time remaining. That would, the premise being, no one gets out of here alive, and each of us has a limited amount of QTR. So when people show up for things that we run, like a Monday morning, thank God it's Monday program. The fact that somebody's willing to give up some of their QTR to be in that means that, there's a reason for that. Like that's pretty valuable currency. So
yeah, and it absolutely is. And I think a lot of the value for people, and you and I talk about this often in our community, is connection and having a place where you can talk about stuff that isn't, it's not stuff you might be in conversation about every day. It's not, it goes a little bit deeper than how you doing. So I think the connection has definitely been a big part of it, and people look forward to that. And having the space to just turn up and see what comes up. So.
It's funny, I'm thinking of the call we had last week with Jamie Smart and the Clarity Coach Tribe, where we were talking about program design and things. And one of Jamie's premises was, what gift would you want to give to people? So like the way I think about your Thank God It's Monday call, it's like, what gift are people getting from that? Well, one, like you just described, Sunday night, you go to bed like looking forward to Monday morning because of that call. And then the gift of having people start their week, like instead of starting their week in um, a busy, chaotic state of mind, they come on that call. I mean, I guess it depends what time zone they're in, but presumably at first thing in the morning, and they leave that call and start their week in a calm, peaceful, connected feeling. Like I can only imagine the ripple effect that has for the rest of their week and whoever the first person is they come into contact with on Monday morning after that call and so on. So I think framing it in terms of the gift of it, it's I don't know. For me, it's a huge factor.
Yeah, I like that. One of the um, one of the people who turns up every week without fail, unless something major happens, she calls it the gap between the panic.
Mm,
It's a time for her really to relax and tune in,
yeah.
um, and what she's noticed is that gap in general between her panics has
Mm.
widened since being in that conversation. So yeah, it's nice.
Can I share the image that popped in my mind when you described it that way?
Sure.
It was like somebody playing a game where they have to make their way through this corridor or tunnel where there's like boulders rolling at them, and they run a few steps, and then there's a little indent in the wall that they can hide in the gap, and let the next boulder roll by, and then they can jump out and get to the next gap. It the fact that you're providing that person those gaps in their panic, I think is amazing.
Yeah, and you mentioned ripple effect, and that's been the ripple effect that that it can be outside that
Mm.
feeling. We're talking about a feeling. The feeling can be carried on outside of the call, which is, I think, if you're talking
Surprised
to
that you see a
gifts, then that's
post
a
with
gift.
that image on
Yeah,
it.
I know you well enough to know that's where we were going with that, Greg. Yeah.
So I'm curious if you could share some examples of how your coaching has helped a client, or and even if you have a personal example of how coaching has helped you, whatever you want to share that gives people some uh, evidence of what's possible for them when they work with you or with coaches in general.
Well, I think today it's appropriate to start with myself.
Mm.
Um, and noticing how I feel as I am sitting here in this very moment, and recognizing that there was a period of time where this would have felt way out of my comfort zone.
Mm.
Um, as long ago as 2 years and 9 days or something, I think we were talking about earlier. And this isn't, over the years, how coaching has helped me. Initially, when I went through coaching all those years ago, was it hadn't occurred to me prior to that very much to look at myself
Mm.
and to ask myself things like, what do I want, and what do I value, and who am I, or what am I, what am I about? It just hadn't occurred to me. I was just going through life, working and looking for the next thing, the next job, the next whatever. So that very initial coaching helped enormously with that.
Mm.
Um, and for me to get a better sense of, yeah, just I think earlier you mentioned, possibility, and that, yeah, possibility, and really looking at that with different eyes. So I would say that in the initial stages. And what I knew in those days was, when I was working with someone and paying attention to, with intention, to what I wanted to achieve or create, I had a better chance of it actually happening
Mm.
than making things up in my head and thinking it might be a nice idea. So that's what I remember from all those years ago when I first started working with a coach. And what I was referring to half jokingly a minute ago is how the experience I've had in the past few years of being in Jamie's community and looking in the direction of the principles, the change that has made, and that has been a much more profound change in terms of how I feel on the inside, regardless of what circumstances might look like or what's changed on the outside. I mean, I genuinely feel like I'm sitting here having a nice time, and I didn't know that was available to me. I would have had so much thinking and angst about it that yeah, it kind of felt like a stretch. So that comes from a much deeper level of self-awareness, acceptance, and to go back to the point earlier, you are enough. The conversation I was having with Dave this morning was I love to learn, and the constant striving to learn. It felt like that. It felt like striving because I felt like I was almost coming at it from a place of lack. Like I need this thing to be better, to do whatever, to be seen as. And now the learning feels like just such a joy. It's exploration, it's discovery, it's whatever's available out there to find out, and it feels more fun and freeing. So I don't feel like I'm coming at it from a place of lack, at least not on most days. I still have my moments of, and we were chatting before you hit the record button, talking about Michael Singer and the Untethered Soul, and how much we're just laughing at ourselves, seeing how our minds work and what they try to do to us. So yeah, I get caught up, but I get caught up, but I recognize it quickly, and I can laugh at that. I can actually take a chuckle and say, well, that's a bit absurd, really. So I think in terms of change for me, those would be some of the things that come to mind.
And from a client perspective, is there a particular client that had an insight that was, stands out for you and that you'd love to share?
Yeah, I have loads actually, but the person that comes to mind is a young woman who was absolutely super bright, PhD in a very specialized area, and I would have had to go look it up so that I could share that with you. So I'm not even going to bother because I totally flunk that. In a good job at the beginning of her career and crippled with anxiety, self-doubt, label of I am a shy person, so I can't go do these things that I want to do. And the turnaround for her, and I guess it's back to that you are enough thing. She really saw, I was going to say light in herself, but I think it was even beyond that. It's like she really saw a beauty in herself, and that she had something to bring to the table. She worked in a very male she was quite 24, 25. She worked in a very male dominated industry. She's like 5 foot nothing, tiny little thing. So, diminutive young woman. And she had a fear of sharing her intellect and what she thought she could bring to the table, and that shifted. But they really were, baby steps over a period of time so that she could dip her toe in the water and go, oh, how does that feel? Okay, I can go a little bit further. How does that feel? Oh, okay, I can go a little bit further. But what she saw was she could call upon people, and she hadn't been confident to do that. So she started reaching out to people to figure out where can I get support and how can I figure out how to do that in this board meeting or whatever. So I guess it was her seeing, it was hope really that there were possibilities. She knew there were possibilities, but she was kind of afraid to crack the door open. So yeah,
Nice.
she's doing very well.
Good to
Right.
hear.
Yeah.
If there's one thing you'd want people to know, what would that be?
This was the only question I remembered, and I made a note, but I didn't write one thing. I wrote loads. So I've already mentioned the "you are enough" a couple of things. I think one thing that's been coming up a lot over the past little bit is follow the nudges. You know, when something comes up and it looks like, oh, that might be worth looking at or trying, seeing what happens. So follow the nudges, because I think there were times, and there are still times, where I don't pay enough attention to that. And you know, when you do it, it can be such fun. Yeah, if I hadn't followed that, thank God it's Monday nudge, I wouldn't be having those lovely Monday mornings with a group of people that were having shitty Monday mornings.
Yeah.
So I think we get nudges quite regularly, and I think people are busy. There's all sorts of stress and worries and stuff going on. So it's maybe kind of give them a little space to come through and see what happens.
Yeah. I love the idea of following the nudges. We're both listening to Michael Singer's Living from a Place of Surrender, I think it's called. But surrendering to those nudges is what was coming to my mind when you said that. And then ironically, the next thought that popped in my head was my philosophy of minding the gap. Like when a lot of us are aware of the nudges, but then we don't act on them quickly, and we ruminate on them, and we sleep on them, and that voice in our head, as it's very good at doing, comes up with all the reasons why you shouldn't follow that nudge, or why that nudge is stupid or ridiculous, or that we're not worthy, or all those things. So yeah, I love that.
I have a folder on the bookshelf next to me that's full of those ones.
Yeah.
Yep, it is full of those ones.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the mind the gap, because you and I talked about that, and you have encouraged me on more than one occasion to do just that. And I'd say the Monday thing came from that. It was like, I think the idea happened on I don't know, I can't remember exactly. Maybe it was a Tuesday, and I mentioned it to two people, and I was like, oh, well, I'll just throw something out and see what happens. So in the past, I would have been analyzing, thinking about, right, I better get a fancy something up, or I better go and put a feeler out and see if loads of people, and then I better think about what it's going to be and what it's going to. I'm like, well, I just won't do that this time and see what happens. And yeah, and I think in that, the following the nudges, that we have to have some sort of quiet to even hear them, or to pay attention. And something that just popped to mind there was when people have a health issue going on, and it could be a niggle or something like, yeah, it's nothing, it's okay, it's nothing, it's fine, and it goes on until it isn't nothing. That's a nudge. Even that's a nudge. That your body's trying to tell you something. So they kind of happen regularly.
Well, if anyone listening to this is getting a nudge to reach out and contact Lynne Brannigan, how would they find you? Where's the best way for them to get to know more about you?
They can send me an email, lynnebrannigan@mac.com, or just look at lynnebrannigan.com. Very simple.
Not bad. And if you want to watch Lynne and I and our friend Elaine in action, you can go on YouTube or the usual podcast platforms and watch Coaches Exploring Clarity, Coaches Exploring Songs, Coaches Exploring.
Or join us in Insight Games.
Insight Game. You can come play the Insight Games with us. There's lots, hours and hours of us available online to get to know us a little bit more. Anyway, Lynne, this has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed having you on again, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Gary. Lots of
Thanks.
fun.
Take care.
Thanks for asking me.
My pleasure.